As we last saw, the Italians had invaded Greece, trying to exert their dominance over the Mediterranean Sea, stating that it was their Roman legacy. After their initial success, they were pushed back to the Albanian frontier. The Greek commander-in-chief Alexandros Papikos had achieved an astonishing victory that surprised both enemies and allies alike. Welcome to our second video in our series on the Battle of Greece. If you're interested in the history of this era, don't forget to check out our second channel, The Cold War. The link is in the top right corner. Thanks to Magellan TV for sponsoring this video. If you haven't heard yet, Magellan TV is an awesome new type of documentary streaming service and run by filmmakers that has over 2,000 documentaries worth watching. Recently we've been watching a documentary series from Magellan TV and we recommend it highly. It's called World War II Battles Won and Lost, and this 8-episode series discusses tactical and strategic matters of modern combat. Magellan TV has the richest and most varied history content available anywhere. Ancient, modern, current, early modern, war, biography, and even non-historical genres like science and crime are historical in nature. We're big fans of Battlefields of the World Wars, covering 8 crucial battles of the World Wars. You can watch World War II Battles Won and Lost and Battlefields of the World Wars anytime, anywhere, on your television, laptop or mobile device, and it's compatible with most devices. The best part is Magellan TV is offering a 1-month free membership trial to our viewers. If you haven't signed up to Magellan yet, support our channel and do that at try.magellantv.com/kingsandgenerals. You'll get a free 1-month membership trial. The fall of Korcha was a catastrophic defeat for the Italian army. Soon, General Ubaldo Soddu started creating a new defensive line to hold the Greek offensive until sufficient reinforcements arrived. These were inexperienced troops from North Africa, no match for the battle-hardened Greeks. Papikos had originally divided his forces into 3 army corps for the offensive. The first corps under General Panagiotis Themistokos, the second commanded by General Ioannis Papadopoulos, and the third led by General Gorgios Solakoglu. The third corps saw itself victorious at the Battle of Moravas Ivan, and in result brought the fall of Korcha to fruition, while the first was chasing the Italians from Epirus, and alarmingly the second at the Pindus sector was still being organized to join the offensive. Themistokos penetrated the Albanian frontier, aiming to advance towards the town of Tepelena on the Vajousa River. Until the fall of Korcha, the Greek army had been transporting their supplies to the front lines through muddy roads from the cities of Florina and Amendeio. From then on, the transport of supplies would be carried out by motorized vehicles. But these vehicles were numerically inadequate and in a bad state, and so the Greek army needed to take the port of Saranda to shorten the supply route. Thus, a major offensive to the Saranda-Kakavia-Leskaviki line began, and would be carried out by the Lumbas detachment with assistance from elements of the 1st Corps. To let the 8th Division under General Charalambos Katsamitros advance, the Greeks first needed to take the Italian position at Metsani, where the Vajousa River starts. Katsamitros' cavalry divisions were sent to strike at Metsani, while the 8th prepared to advance into the border post of Kakavia. On November 21st, the 8th's cavalry defeated a strong Italian force and took Metsani. The way was open for Katsamitros' advance, and soon the Greeks were at the roads of Kakavia. The Lumbas detachment faced the Italians near Agomenitsa and forced their retreat. By November 22nd, the 1st Corps had pushed into the Albanian frontier in Epirus, recovering all of the lost territory, and the 2nd Corps was finally ready to deploy. The southern defensive Italian line now stretched from the port of Saranda to the village of Leskaviki, close to Eseka. It was guarded by the 11th Army under General Carlo Geloso, composed of the depleted veteran Ferrara and Siena divisions, as well as the Centaro motorized division. Soddu reinforced this army with the 5th Posterior Alpine Division and the 37th Modena Division. In the north, General Mario Vercellini's 9th Army had retreated in disorder to the Pogradec-Kamia-Ostrobista line to defend strategically important Elbasan. On top of that, the Balkan winter weakened the Italians, as most of their troops had come from North Africa and weren't accustomed to the cold of the Balkans. From Aseka, General Gorgios Kosmas's K Corps took Leskaviki and was later reorganized into the 5th Corps, with the goal of securing the connection between the 2nd and 3rd Corps. In Epirus, Domesticus now pondered his next moves. To reach Tepelena, he had to use the mountain passes from the northwest to the northeast. But at Caccavia, the exhausted 8th Division was facing heavy resistance from the Ferrara and Modena entrenched in the forests. On November 28th, the 8th was reinforced by the 3rd Division, and soon the Italians retreated from Caccavia. Meanwhile, the coastal forces continued their advance towards Saranda, and in the north, the 9th and 13th Divisions were sent to attack the 48th Taro Division defending Pogradec. The Taro fought valiantly, preventing Solekoglu from making any progress. Stymied in front of Pogradec because of a shortage of anti-armor weaponry, the Greek general tried a flanking movement in the hills to the west of the town. On November 30th, the 13th Division overcame the Italians, while the 17th Division was brought up to relieve it. On December 4th, Pogradec fell to the Greeks, the 3rd key Albanian town to do so. With the capture of Pogradec, the 3rd Corps was relegated to a passive role, while the offensive aimed towards Tepelena continued. This offensive had been delayed by air attacks, and to continue their advance, the Greeks needed the 2nd Corps to take the town of Permet and secure the Drina Valley, from which Italian snipers threatened the 1st Corps' position. In early December, the 2nd Corps began its advance along the Vajusa River, aiming to secure the connection between the 1st and 3rd Corps. They faced the Modena Division, with the exhausted remnants of the Julia attached. Sensing the enemy's weakness, Papadopoulos attacked the exposed Julia. The Julia was routed, and Modena had to retreat. Soon, the towns of Permet and Frascia fell to the 2nd Corps' advance. At this point, Mussolini was trying to save face by accusing the Greeks of a deep hatred against the Italians, and that they were offering military bases to the British. Praising the tenacity of these soldiers on the front, he urged the Italian people to have faith that Soddu would save the situation. But in Berlin, Hitler was furious about the Italian failure, and he wrote a highly critical letter to Il Duce, blaming him of tarnishing the reputation of the Axis, both politically and militarily. The Führer was preparing his forces for an invasion of Greece. Throughout December, reinforcements continued to pour in to support the retreating Italians, but they were coming too slowly. Soddu was demoralized and wanted an armistice to end the conflict with the Greeks. This angered Mussolini, who sacked Soddu and replaced him with Ugo Cavallero. Cavallero had carefully studied the situation and decided that it would be best to retreat to the Shkumbin River, a natural barrier that spans the width of Albania from the northern approaches of Pogradec in the east to the Adriatic Sea in the west. Frustratingly for the Italians, Cavallero's order to withdraw and reform at Shkumbin came after a series of valiant rearguard actions that gave the Greeks considerable trouble. Though the Greeks had taken Permet on December 3rd, the Italian line of defense across the Kosura Valley was getting stronger. As the 10th and 11th Divisions braced to try and break the line, further to the west the 1st Corps was making slow progress from Caccavia up the Drina Valley along a hugely extended front of 40 miles. It was easier going along the coast, but the Greek advance was brought almost to a halt by bitter fighting on the road to Agira Castro. Along that road stood Hill 669, a strategic height coveted by the Greeks. Gelosso's 11th Army held fanatically onto Hill 669 in 3 feet snow, repulsing several assaults by the Greek 8th Division. By now, the weather was inflicting far more casualties on both sides than the fighting did. For this reason, Domesticus had placed the extenuated 8th Division in reserve, while the 2nd, 3rd and 4th Divisions would be the new vanguard of the 1st Corps. On December 4th, a break in the weather enabled Hill 669 to be taken by Domesticus's forces. Soldiers of both sides were later found frozen to death. 1 day later, the 3rd Division marched into Delvina, while the 4th Division captured Devikan. On December 6th, the Ljumbes detachment finally occupied the key port of Saranda, and the road to Agira Castro was finally open. The following day, General Leonidas Stereopoulos of the 4th Division began his attack on the outskirts of Agira Castro. With Cavallero's order to retreat to the Shkambin River, the city had been evacuated by the Italians one day earlier. On December 8th, elements of the 4th occupied Agira Castro, and another of the Italian centres in Albania fell. Next on the Greek list was Tepelena. The town stood between heights, and the Italians had been fortifying it for 2 months. Because of incessant blizzards, the first Greek attacks on December 15th failed. At the same time, the 3rd Corps successfully secured the Pogradec area, and the 5th Corps captured the Ostrovica mountain, advancing towards Mount Tomari. On the coast, the Greeks continued their advance towards the town of Himare, which stood in the way of the new objective, the important supply port of Valona. General Gorgias Bakos of the 3rd Division was blocked at Borsh by 3 battalions of grenadiers, some black shirt militias, and the depleted Siena Division. Borsh was an ideal defensive position south of Himare, and the grenadiers made full use of its advantages, fortifying it with light and heavy artillery, mortars and machine guns. It took 3 days of relentless attacks and many casualties for the position to fall into Greek hands. The 3rd Division now advanced northeastwards and surrounded Himare. On December 19th, the northeastern town of Kuts fell to a surprise attack, and 2 days later, the northwestern height of Sipista fell as well. Himare was now surrounded, and the Siena was forced to abandon the town to avoid encirclement. The Greek troops entering the town on December 22nd were welcomed by the locals with enthusiastic celebrations. Despite this success, Metaxas knew that eventually the Italians could regroup and start a counteroffensive. He wanted to halt the offensive and define a clear strategy of defense in the now overextended 155-mile line from Pogradec in the north to Himare in the south. On the other hand, Papagos had no other intention than to keep advancing. On December 28th, Metaxas managed to convince Papagos. The Greek objective was now to consolidate the supply and communications lines, while the 2nd Corps prepared for an offensive to capture the Kelsura Valley. By this point, the 3rd and 5th Corps were reorganized into the West Macedonia Army Department, including the 9th, 10th, 13th and 17th Divisions. Under General Ioannis Pitzikas, their mission was to hold the Korcha-Pogradec sector up to the Yugoslav frontier. Papadopoulos' 2nd Corps held the central sector on either side of the Vatusa River, with the 1st, 11th and 15th Divisions. And on the left, comprising the Agira Castro sector as far as the coast, stood Themistokos' 1st Corps with the 2nd, 3rd and 4th Divisions, along with the much-handled 8th Division, and with the 5th and 16th Divisions in reserve. The Greeks bolstered their position with around 280,000 men in total. Conversely, Cavallero concentrated most of his strength in the centre, with Virgilino's 9th Army and Gelosso's 11th Army anchored on Mount Tomari, overlooking the Kelsura Valley and the Tomarica Valley, the obvious Greek routes for an advance on Tirana. Further on the Italian right was General Carlo Rossi's reformed 25th Corps, from the coast to the Tomarica Valley, with 6 divisions in defence of Valona. In total, there were around 100,000 men between the right and the centre, with 60,000 more in reserve. On the left, General Gabriele Naschi's 26th Corps was in front of the West Macedonia Army Department, with around 100,000 more men. With a total of 260,000 men, the Italians had strengthened their position, and finally Cavallero had reached an equilibrium. On January 5th, Cavallero launched a snap attack on the Greek lines on the coast. The 58th Legnano Division would advance along the coast to Himare, while Pusteria, Siena and 7th Lupi di Toscana were to hit the 2nd Corps in the centre. The Legnano made some progress but was quickly immobilized, while in the centre, the 15th Division defeated the Wolves of Tuscany, and the 1st and 11th started a counter-offensive against the Kelsura Valley. In just 5 days, and with the reinforcement of the Cretan 5th Division, the strategic Klesura Pass fell and the Kelsura Valley was secured. By January 25th, the Second Corps' mission had been achieved with the occupation of the Trebishina mountain range. 2 days later, Rossi's 25th Corps counterattacked and expelled the Greek forces on the Trebishina mountains. The Cretan 5th managed to hold the Italians and repulsed the attack by January 29th. After a hard-fought struggle, the Cretans captured Trebishina on February 2nd. In the following weeks, this division repulsed several Italian attacks trying to dislodge them from the mountain, even under the deadly frozen weather of Trebishina. By the 17th of February, the Greeks had captured the mountain ranges, but it was a costly victory, particularly for the Cretan division, which suffered 5,000 casualties. Greek morale suffered a heavy blow after the death of Metaxas on January 29th. It was certain that the Germans would attack through Bulgaria, and Papagos decided to reorganize his forces to meet this new threat, transferring many divisions back to the Bulgarian border. The 1st and 2nd Corps were placed under the Epirus Army Department, commanded by General Marcos Drakos, with a total of 9 divisions. Papagos then ordered Drakos to launch a desperate offensive to take Tepelena and the key port of Valona. This offensive failed, and as a result, Papagos replaced Drakos with General Pitsikas, while Solakoglu would be left in command of the West Macedonia Army Department. Pitsikas concentrated most of his forces on the Trebishina mountains and dug entrenchments to provide cover, as he sensed that a renewed Italian offensive would be directed against it. And he was right. The Italians now had 28 divisions, and on March 2nd, Mussolini himself arrived in Tirana to oversee the operation. Il Duce wanted to save face by performing a last offensive with the objective of pushing back the Greeks and allowing the Italians to take Epirus. The Operazione Primavera was then scheduled to be launched on March 9th. The plan was to capture back the Klesura Pass and from there advance towards Leskoviki and Ioannina. The attack would be carried out by General Gastone Gambara's 8th Corps, composed of 8 divisions, and the veteran Centauro and Piemonte in reserve. Pitsikas, on the other hand, made General Bakos the new commander of the 2nd Corps and placed the 17th in his reserve. The spring offensive started at dawn, with a devastating artillery barrage and air bombardment. The Puglia division then advanced to capture the strategic Hills 717 and 731 against General Vasileios Vraknos' 1st Division, while the Pinerolo and Sforsesca divisions were pressing up on Meskarahe Ridge. The Italians were repelled, but the Puglia wouldn't give up. A second charge momentarily secured Hill 717, lost it, and then regained it at about 12 PM. Throughout the day, 6 more attempts on Hill 731 came to naught, except to leave piles of Italians dead in front of the Greek lines. At sunset, the Italians remained in possession of Hill 717, but Vraknos wasn't overly worried as long as Hill 731 remained in the 1st Division's hands. Simultaneous Italian attacks on the left of the line failed against the 11th and 15th Divisions. On the Italian right, there was similar ill luck, with the 8th Division stopping the advance towards Meskarahe. The next day broke with another artillery barrage and the Puglia trying once again to take Hill 731. Gambara saw himself perilously near to taking the hill, but was finally repelled. The 1st still held firm. The Cagliari division came to assist the Puglia, trying to outflank the hill, but Vraknos placed units to protect his flanks, and the Cagliari was repelled as well. The fruitless attacks in the mud and rain continued on March 11th. They followed a predictable pattern. Cavallero seems to have no other ideas than to repeatedly feed his men into the Greek artillery and machine guns. The following day, the exhausted Puglia was replaced by the fresh Bari division, which also suffered heavy losses. By the 6th day of the offensive, the strain was beginning to tell. Some Italian units had to be driven forward, and machine gun detachments were set up in the rear to discourage stragglers. By the 15th of March, no fewer than 17 bloody and fruitless attempts had been made on Hill 731. Gambara urged an immediate suspension of the offensive, but Mussolini wouldn't give up that easily. In the meantime, Bakos replaced the much battered 1st Division with the 17th. On March 18th, Cavallero ordered the 18th attempt to take Hill 731 to be carried out by the Siena with armoured units from the Centauro. This attack, like the others, ended up in bloody heaps on the lower slopes of the hill. Italian casualties in the space of 10 days had been fearsome, with 12,000 dead to no visible advantage. Hill 731 was strewn with the bodies of Greeks and Italians. On March 22nd, the Italians transmitted a request for a ceasefire around the hill, but Papagos counter-proposed a general truce all along the front. The Italians rejected it, and twice more the Siena charged the hill to no avail. After that, Cavallero finally had to admit defeat, and on March 25th, the operation came to a halt. The heroic and battered 1st Division was sent home for a rest in the reserves, and Papagos rearranged his forces again, threatened by the looming German invasion, but still worried about the Italians. The spring offensive was a failure that weakened Mussolini's domestic and international position. The Greeks celebrated this victory, but they had been exhausted and sustained many casualties, leaving them weakened against a German attack. This attack was about to come, and we will cover it, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We would like to express our gratitude to our Patreon supporters and channel members who make the creation of our videos possible. Now you can also support us by buying our merchandise via the link in the description. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.